One of the most confusing things in Railjack for me have been the battle avionics. Not only has the avionics grid been very confusing to me, the avionics descriptions didn't really give me a good picture of what each ability did. With the Railjack retrofit, the avionics grid has been replaced with the plexus and the avionics with battle mods. I have to give props to the UI design team, because the new interface makes it much easier to understand how Railjack mods work. Still, I think it's hard for new players that are just getting into Railjack to know what the battle mods do. There is no simulacrum for the Railjack, so to test each mod you have to go into a mission, and then return to the dry dock to swap them. And if you don't have the mods, you can't even test them. So the purpose of this video is to explain Railjack battle mods basics and show how each of them works. I will also mention how each of them was changed with the Railjack rework. Battle mods give you abilities that you can use while you're in the pilot or the gunner seat in the Railjack. They are now personal to you, not tied to the Railjack as they were before. You can choose them under the Battle tab in your plexus. They don't use mod capacity, but there are 3 types: defensive, offensive and super, and you can only choose one mod of each type. The battle mods now use Warframe energy, instead of flux energy. After using an ability, the cost increases and then decreases to the original cost over time. This has been done to prevent spamming. The Forge can now be used to instantly replenish Warframe energy. I would recommend using frames with large energy pools, like Ivara or Wisp, for Railjack missions. I also use preparation on them, so I can start using the abilities immediately. Lavos and Hildren use their systems of cooldowns and shield recharges to use battle mods. I know that tons of people complain about Lavos' cooldowns, but he is actually great for Railjack missions. The cooldown on abilities is about as long as it takes for the energy cost to go back to normal, and you don't need to go to the Forge to replenish your energy, since you won't run out of it. The duration, range and strength of battle mods depend on the reactor you're using. The Sigma reactors, that you can get from the Railjack Research Console in the dojo, increase all the stats equally. Laven Mk1 and 2 reactors increase ability duration, and the Mk3 increases both duration and strength. Vidar Mk1 and 2 reactors increase range, and the Mk3 increases range and duration. And the Zetki Mk1 and 2 reactors increase strength, and the Mk3 reactor increases strength and range. For most abilities I would recommend using either the Vidar Mk2 reactor or the Zetki Mk3 reactor. For this video, I'm using the default Sigma reactor that doesn't affect the battle mods. I will also be demonstrating the abilities in Sover Strait, which is the easiest Railjack mission to establish a baseline. I'll also show examples of using them in higher level missions, using different reactors. For the defensive mod slot, you can choose between countermeasures, munitions vortex and blackout pulse. Countermeasures lets you release flares that distract enemy-guided projectiles. Each subsequent use doubles the cost, but it's still not much compared to the other abilities. It's not really noticeable what the flares do, but it can be useful if you're piloting and circling around an enemy base while the away team does their business inside. Munitions vortex creates a vortex that absorbs incoming fire and then detonates, releasing the damage. You can manually detonate the vortex by pressing the ability button again, or let it run its duration. The ability is effective at dealing damage with good turrets, but the range is rather small for me. The base range was decreased from 150 meters before the rework to 70 meters. The maximum we can increase it to is 126 meters, which is rather small for space battles, but it can be used effectively. Blackout Pulse lets you send out an electromagnetic pulse that damages enemies and disables them temporarily. It detonates on impact, or you can detonate it manually by pressing the ability key again to increase the blast radius. The explosion delivers additional pulses after the initial burst, based on how many targets were hit. I mostly use it against cruise ships, but it can be used to take down big groups of enemies with a well-timed detonation. Keep in mind that it doesn't home in on its target, so it's better to detonate it in its vicinity. Offensive mods are Tether, Shatter Burst and Particle Ram. Tether has previously been the most used avionic and it has been severely nerfed in the rework. The duration, range, damage and explosion range have all been severely decreased, but they now depend on the reactor you're using and they can be increased to more than they were originally by using the right reactor. It doesn't explode by itself anymore, instead, the tethered enemies take additional damage and explode on death. It is still useful if you want to group up enemies to kill them with your turrets, but it's not as overpowered as before. My favorite offensive mod is the particle ram. The Railjack ram deals damage to anything it touches when moving forward, and it deals additional damage while drifting. It can be deactivated to launch the ram forward. The base damage has been slightly decreased in the rework, but overall it stayed the same. I just like being able to ram into enemy fighters. Shatter Burst has received the biggest buff with the Railjack rework. Its base range was more than tripled and the damage was increased 12 times, but the duration was lowered to a quarter of what it was before. Still, it delivers a huge amount of damage across a large area. To detonate, press the ability key again, otherwise the projectiles will overshoot. And the 3 super battle mods are Void Hole, Phoenix Blaze and Seeker Volley. Void Hole works as before, it draws in enemies and deals damage. The base duration, range and damage have been decreased, but can be increased depending on the reactor you're using. It's useful if you want to group up enemies, but you should use it with a reactor that increases range.
All units, stand by to overload shields.
Phoenix Blaze, previously Fiery Phoenix, wreathes your Railjack in fire and increases speed and turret damage. It also leaves a fiery wake that damages anything it touches. Damage is accumulated every second and unleashed upon deactivation. This is a good ability in my opinion, it's just hard to tell that it's doing anything unless you are paying attention. I also can't tell it's in most of the time, so I end up turning it off or on at the wrong times. And the currently most used battle mod is Seeker Volley. It fires a volley of homing missiles. It's easy to use since it doesn't require targeting or timing, and it can take down large groups of enemies really quickly. It received a buff in the rework. The base damage was almost doubled and the missiles are faster and better at targeting.
Enemy fighter support has been halved.
Blackout Pulse, Shatter Burst and Seeker Volley are the 3 most used battle mods, and if you are a fan of explosions, you can use all 3. They are very effective and satisfying to use, so they are great for farming. But I think you can get bored easily, and your crewmates won't have much to do. These 3 mods are also the ones that I think are most likely to get nerfed, either in damage or range. Scott has said on the latest dev stream that they will look into buffing the less used ones instead. I think most only need a bit of increase in range to make them more effective in comparison to Shatter Burst and Seeker Volley. I hope this video was helpful. If and when there are any changes to the battle mods, I will cover the differences. As always, thank you for watching.